All right. All right, cool. The delay is quick. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to go over the new updates to Narova, specifically GPT-5 and how all that is in there and all the really, really, really cool stuff you can do. Um, I was super excited about when that came out about 10 days ago. And so I made sure to put all of that goodness into Narova, and I just wanted to go over everything that's in there. So let's share the appropriate screen. All right. So just to clarify everything, because I know it can be a little off-putting compared to the last 30 years, but this is Dramatica.com, right? So this is where the theory sits. Oh, come on, show it. This is where the theory is. Perfect. And kind of like the home base of everything. And off the extension of it, you have the community where you can go through and do your typical forum stuff. The documentation, which I have updated a lot, which we're going to be going over here, and then the platform is where you'll actually find all the good stuff. So if I go to the platform here, so this is like the central hub of all the things that we're building, integrating Dramatica and AI. So subtext is the thing that I built, like 8 years ago. Added AI to it like 3 years ago, and then I've progressively been developing it. That is kind of like its own separate application right now, but we're pulling it over so it'll all be in this one home base. And the first step of that was to take what was previously Muse and now turn that into Narova, which is just all the greatness that you can do nowadays. If I go to the community here, let's do this. So if I go to the community here, yeah, perfect. It's like typical stuff. You can find out all the information there, sign up and ask any of the questions you have. And I tend to put a lot of posts here just really quickly because I've been running this forum for like 11 years now. And it's just a really great place to keep everything in a place where it's easier for everybody to access. The documentation. All right, let's get to the cool Narova stuff. So let me go to the docs. Cool. So if I go to Narova here and we look at the agents, let's do that. So these are all the agents that you have access to in Narova. And so if you know it right now, currently, it's just looks like this, where you can just jump in and put your story idea down, upload your draft, and just start, going to town on it. There's no indication of what agent. So if you don't know anything that I'm going to be talking about, particularly like dramatic theory, you don't even have to worry about it. That's the great part is it's all automatic behind the scenes. But I think it's interesting if you are familiar with dramatic theory or you want to know more about it and maybe get to what it is that you want to do with more accuracy, not more accuracy, but more determinism, like set it yourself, then it can be helpful to know what these different agents. So what's really fun is I've come to the conclusion that Dramatica has been waiting for AI forever. So pretty much everything that Dramatica already came up with was just needed the technology of AI to fully unlock everything that's inside of it. And one of those things are the four stages of communication. So Dramatica breaks uh, the communication between author to audience. So if you think of this little path here from author, and they have their story, and then the audience, that it unfolds in four passes. So four different stages. The first one would be story forming, where your intent gets crystallized as a single model. So it's a single sort of object that you can hold, a schematic of what it is that you're trying to say. Story encoding is when you take that model and you embody it with all the different people, places, things, the storytelling that sits on top of it. Um, that is the difference between story encoding and story form. Subtext was kind of playing with this, where the underlying subtext of it is the story form, whereas what you actually read and all that stuff is the story encoding. The third step is story weaving. So once you have all that stuff listed out, then how does it all kind of interleave with each other? And how do you, do you start at the end? Do you start at the beginning? How does that all weave together? And then finally, the last one that we have little control over is story reception. So that's their comprehension. Are the seats comfortable? Like, can they actually hear what's being said? Is were they able to download the book? Like, getting that part is less of something that the author has any sort of control over, but it's an important part of the stage and an important part to think about. So, what's really fun is I've actually mapped each of these stage to its own dedicated agent in Narova that you have access to. The one that's been there since Narova came out about a month and a half ago is the story forming one. So that is the story former. It's the one that knows all the rules of Dramatica, can help you get to the story form. You can just drop into um, Narova and just put a story idea and say, I need to find out the story form for this, and it will help walk you through it so you can get down to it. Currently, there's about 30,000 different story forms, 32,767 to be exact. And getting down to that one story form would be the process of what is going on in here. The newest one is the story encoding agent. And so that one will help you take all the stuff that you have already figured out in your story form, and then be able to branch out and try different ideas for the different parts of different through lines, different aspects of it. This is where all the illustrations from subtext, where you can pull all these hundreds of thousands of different what Dramatica used to call GIFs. You can pull all those out and organize them and figure all that stuff out. And it's also a place where if you have a bit of storytelling, it'll be able to align it with the underlying story form. So you can write a whole bunch of stuff for a particular scene, and then it can help pull that back towards the story form itself. So that's the story encoding one. The story weaving one, I actually have all the bits and pieces for it from subtext. So if you remember in subtext, you go through these stages kind of like a top down. And usually when people get to the plotting section where they move stuff around, it's where they usually give up because it's just too complex and it's just a lot of information to manage. So what's great with this is you'll be able to send off a task to Narova and just say, hey, can you put this in the best order possible? And it will give you, one version of it. You can try a different version and have it weave it all on its own and come back to you, in 10, 15 minutes with the whole thing figured out. And then story reception, that'll be way down the line. We'll work on that stuff. And then so those are the 4 stages, and you always have access to them. You can just say, "Send me to the story forming agent," or just put the word story forming in the beginning. It'll know exactly what you're looking for. And then the other 2 that are an additional ones, and there'll probably be more as we go along, but one is completely dedicated to Dramatica theory. So it's really important. Sometimes foundational models, because they use everything that they've read off the internet or whatever, that kind of thing, their knowledge of Dramatica theory might not be 100%, and you might not be getting quite the right answers, particularly if you try and story form in some other foundational model. So this one here is just about the theory. It looks at all our uh, analysis classes for the last 30 years, all the transcripts from all the classes that I've taught, emails, everything that's in the forums, pulls from dedicated sources, all the stuff that Melanie's ever written, so that it's all in a place where you can kind of trust what is being said. So if there's any part of the theory that you want to learn more and kind of really dive into these different areas, that would be the one to talk to. Character, I found, we can get a lot more accuracy if you just kind of break out the idea of characters in terms of the objective story. So, like your plot, all the different protagonists, antagonists, all the different elements and everything. There'll be a lot more that I'll be adding into this, more visual representations and that kind of thing. But to be able to build out that whole cast, it's just nice to have it separated out from kind of the other stuff. And then the last one is the first one, which is the story guide. So if you've watched any of these live streams over the last couple of weeks, that's what I've been going through, is pulling the threads of the story guide, which was formerly Storyweaver, Melanie's app. So that is all in there. And so let me just show you some of the fun stuff that you can do with it. So I did some things beforehand that I wanted to try. One thing was because I get a lot of questions whether or not this is for analysis or for creativity. Like, well, what am I supposed to do with it? And you can do anything you want to with it is in those areas as long as it has to do with story. So, for instance, if you're doing more creative stuff, you probably want to check out the story guide live streams that I've done the last two times, or just say simply, I have an idea for a story. Let's see if I can actually come up with something different. Um, let's see. Um, takes place in, I don't know, let's say Southeast Asia. Um, it's going to be animated, so maybe, two local uh, animals that are central to that area. Um, Striving to cross the Pacific Ocean to Peru. I don't know. Let's just try that. So it's a completely crazy idea. I have no idea where I'm going with it, and you just send that off. So the first thing it'll do is it will try and figure out which agent that you want to talk to or who it is that you should be uh, given control over to. And currently, this process is I have chosen accuracy over speed, with the hope that speed will pick up relatively soon, technically. And then also, if I can do some more testing and find out that you still get the same results at a quicker pace, we'll do it. So you can see here it handed off to the story guide agent, loading up all the context, setting the narrative agent, and now it's reading through all the stuff that it needs to know to be able to walk you through that whole step. And there you go. It went really fast for the very first step. So it's orienting everything to the story guide. And then now, if you have watched any of the story guide stuff, you know that this is like kind of the first step in it, where it asks you what's the big idea, essentially just asking questions about your original idea as if you are the audience watching it or reading it, and all the questions you would have about, like what exactly drives these two animals to reach Peru. What do they do as a duo? Define their contrasting traits. What is the intended tone? So it's just supposed to like spur a lot of creative thought. Like, okay, well, I have no idea. The idea I came up with out of nowhere. I have no idea what the two animals are, why they're even going there. And the idea is that as you work on this, which is really fun, is you'll start to learn a lot about yourself because your answers to these questions are really about answers back to you and what it is that you want to write. So it can be a very personal experience. I've noticed that even doing these live streams, that it can be very personal, kind of walking through this process. So that's and it the steps, there's 40, 50 steps. It can take you forever. I've only gone through maybe 7 or 8 steps in 1.5 hour, like about 3 hours. So it's a lot. And anytime you want to flip over to story forming, you can just switch like, hey, let's just go back over to story forming and let's start figuring this out. So that's how that works. And if you want to read, kind of the reasoning, the thoughts that go on as it's trying to figure all that stuff out, that's what this indication is here. So you can still open it up and read it. Because there's so much information now that comes through, I don't show it as it's going through. I just kind of show the summaries of it, which you'll see here in a second for story forming. So that would be the story guide agent. And again, I'm already in the process of kind of working that out in a separate live stream sort of category. So let's go back. All right. So then the next question is like story forming. So if you know Dramatica theory, it's great. You can just, go like, hey, I want to write a story that has these um, aspects to it: a steadfast, doer, linear, action driven. Let's do failure good story where the MC domain is in universe and the OS is in psychology. Not sure the concerns yet. Oh, and actually, let's just do it. Let's just do this. All right. So, hey, I want to write a story that has these aspects to it. Steadfast, doer, learning, da 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 da. Help me figure out the story form. All right. So, hopefully, this will send us off to the story forming agent. Be able to get that in there. So, this is a really weird way to do it, unless you're like really heavy into Dramatica and you know that this is a coming of age story where the main character's source of conflict is their place in the world, kind of like who they are, and they're too fat, too skinny, and then the conflict of everybody that everybody's dealing with are the dysfunctional psychologies. So cool. Hand it off to the story form. This is great. This is what I wanted a year ago, but the tech wasn't there. And so anybody who suffered through Muse and subtext in 2024, um, this is it finally. It finally works. All right, so now it'll be going through story forming, balancing all the instructions. You can read through it if you want to as it goes through. But if you want to go off and get some coffee, do something, you can always hang back and wait for it to finish it off. So the thing with the current setup that I have, it's going to keep going to get you like the greatest answer ever. So it's really eager to help you out. It'll keep working until it gets what it thinks are the best answers for you. And it will always start out kind of outlining what it's going to do up top. So you can kind of get an idea of where it's headed towards. So, it's going to confirm your creative intent because the story form is all about your creative intent, right? So it's like not every story is the same. Whatever it is that you're trying to say with the story, that's what it's trying to figure out. So then you can assign the remaining two domains that your choice is for. Okay, because I've already picked where the main character and the objective story is. I can assign the remaining two domains. It should pick up that there's only one answer to that. So that'll be interesting. Offer 3 curated concern packages. So because I didn't have the story form completely figured out, it's going to suggest 3 different ideas for 3 different areas. And then you pick one, then we'll go into goal consequence and clarify a few of the dynamics. So again, it'll restate the goal, lock in the structure based on Dramatica rules. And so, again, because you set the main character in universe and the objective story and psychology, the other two domains fall into place. So, the objective story domain, which is perfect, that's exactly what we wanted to find out. Because the objective story domain is in psychology, the balancing part of that for the relationship story domain would be physics. So if you have it in psychology, then the balance would be in physics. So it's doing it for you. So no more of this like I don't have to get emails anymore or people saying Muse doesn't work. It's telling me you can do these things that Dramatica can't do. That's no longer a problem. Steadfast, doer, linear, action, failure, good. And this is perfect. So it picked up on the fact that because the main character domain is in universe, the main character approach will be doer. So one of the aspects of a story form is whether or not the main character has a tendency to act first and then think, or to think first and then act. So one will be external and then maybe internalize afterwards, whereas Beers will internalize first as a method to kind of resolve their conflict. And failure good means the plan doesn't succeed, but the personal takeaway is affirming. So let's choose the concern. So each through line will feature all 4 of its types across the story, but one stands out as the persistent source of conflict, which again is true. So underneath each of the domains, you have four types, and each of those will end up being an act, but one of those will be the central area where you will have trouble. So here, identity under pressure. So this one is interesting because this concern should be being. The other three are aligned with each other. So that one's a little bit off, but that'll be interesting because I will show you how that's going to work. Here, this see it just flipped being and becoming. So that's a very interesting thing. So I mean, if you think about it, it's hard to describe the difference between being and becoming, whereas being are more playing roles and, appearing to be something or somebody that you're not, whereas becoming is a complete transformation. So we'll look into why that is not working out right. And then this one is off as well. Okay, this is great. If you want forced metamorphosis for sustain yourself, choose A. If you want coerced roles and optics, choose B. If you want schemes and models under C. So I will say, because I am Dramatica, I will say, A, some of those concerns don't line up. You sure about all that? And it should be able to correct itself about that issue. Again, this is like heavy Dramatica type stuff. So it's going through and just clarifying all the concerns and steps. There's likely something that I left out there that I will have to fix up. Oh, it's going to do it again. All right, well, how about this? How about you organize them according to concern groups? That might help things out. All right. So the idea is that some of these are not completely aligned. They're not like the same area, which is the strength of a story form is you can go through and write, you can write whatever you want. But what will happen is sometimes is there might be one or two through lines that aren't aligned with the other set. All four, and all four of them need to be in the same group in order to feel narratively coherent. So yeah, here we go. So let me show you what that means. So for instance, in the very first one here, it has becoming, progress, preconscious, and doing. So one of these is not right. And if I go down here, and here are the four valid rows, right? So here, progress, preconscious, doing, it should have been being, right? So roles, behaviors. These are the four groups that we've settled on kind of the names of them. So if you're writing a story where all the conflict is situated in people's concepts and how they envision the world, how things used to be in the past, their memories, what they understand, essentially all the Christopher Nolan coolness stuff, then that would be the foundation's concern. If you're in more of the functions family, then it would be playing roles, how things are changing, impulsive responses, and doing things, how we act under pressure. And destinations would be the becoming, future, subconscious, obtaining area, where the feel and focus is around end states, transformation, primal drives, acquiring and losing things. Or maybe you want to focus all your conflict in this story on the deliberations, which would be conceiving, present, conscious, and learning. So immediate buying, deliberate thinking, inquiry, training, figuring out the idea. What's interesting, and I just put this in the forums, is the last 15, 20 years have been this last one here at the bottom. So ever since the iPhone came out, everybody's been in this area, like zeitgeist cultural trend. Prior to that, the 15, 20 years before that was this area. So this is where you got Sixth Sense and The Matrix and turn of the century stuff. Prior to that, it was in this area, and then prior to that, it was in this area. So we are currently in this area again, repeating essentially the same stories from 80 years ago. So, all right. Did you figure out? Yeah, yeah. Do you want? I corrected the earlier mix and now present four legally aligned concern packages. So what's really fun is because we're hooked up. Dramatica and Wright Brothers are uh, coming together. Then finding the exact story form that works becomes a lot easier because it's just we can communicate back and forth and make sure everything all lines up. So that would be how you would do the story form. If you're just coming from a straight story forming idea, you want to just go to the story form agent. Oh, this is what I wanted to see. Is I like, well, if I do, um, actually, which one of these sounds interesting? Let's do the one that's of the time. So let's do the destination one. What do I have to choose next? So essentially just going through and doing the story forming process, but in a conversational manner. Just kind of like working your way through it as opposed to clicking buttons and kind of not having an idea of the actual context of what it is that you are working through and just seeing words pop up. I personally think it's not as productive, but I know some people love to do that. So we'll be bringing that over too. All right. So what it did is it went through and it assigned the domains. So the domain of universe and psychology I did at the very beginning. Now it put the concerns of each through line, so the thematic focus of what it's actually like looking at in that through line in a certain area so that all four of them are connected. So even though they're presented in four separate, they're all looking at the same thing just from different points of view. So conflict in this story from the objective story point of view, from the plot, is going to look like people having conflict with transforming, changing. From the main character point of view, it's going to look like the future. From looking at the influence character, it's going to look like it's all about subconscious drives and desires and the relationship, which is usually the relationship between the two. It's going to be about losing something or gaining something. So then it will go through and choose the other stuff. Now, this is interesting. So now it's like I have a story goal of becoming. I have no idea what that means, but I know it's a failure, right? So then the consequence is going to come up there. And then now it's going to ask me to choose the objective story issue underneath. So underneath the concerns, there's four more. If we're going to talk about becoming, you're going to want to talk about like um, when you become and transform yourself, it's greater accountability. Who's going to be responsible to take care of things? Commitments. So you're make yourself, give yourself a commitment and dedicate yourself to something that you might not even want. Obligation. Paying debts down, duties, things that you obligate yourself to. These are all things you don't want to do. Rationalization, justifying kind of bad transformations and all that stuff. So, and then this is nice too. Oh, even though we don't need to pick those because everything's connected. So once you get down to kind of like the nitty gritty, things start to get locked in. But these would be the other issues that are a part of those other through lines. But what I wanted to work on was actually, I wanted to think about the pivotal elements and then also how that connects to the goal. Let's take our same idea. This story is about a pair of animals trying to sail from Southeast Asia to Peru. So I gave a little bit of storytelling to the story forming agent, and they might go ahead and kind of add some ideas of what that might look like. So it's going to analyze the story structure, and then it will figure out that in terms of the resolution of the story, look at the character arcs based on the story form that we have now, clarify those dynamic elements between those two characters. Like, what is that conflict all about as they go across the Pacific Ocean? and hopefully give us a suggestion of different ones that we can test out. All right, so then this should be more about that. Okay. Now I asked about the pivotal elements. Okay, that's good. So explain how pivotal elements work in a steadfast failure story. Pivotal elements don't work the same in every story. In a story where the main character changes or resolve, it's more about what's really underneath and how they change. In a steadfast story, it's usually about the work that is going on outside. So let's see. All right. So the pivotal element is the tiny key element that binds the main character to the objective story's conflict. And at all these resolutions, all four through lines are connected to each other. That's what kind of binds everything together. So let's see. MC pivotal element, OS solution, MC IC pivotal element is OS problem. This will create a clean bridge to your objective story goal. All right, so what does becoming mean in your story? Choose the most accurate statement of the objective story goal. And because I made it a psychology story, it's not going to be about getting across. That's not the plot. The plot is going to be about the transformation of everybody. So let's see. Make the pair of animals become official ambassadors, mascots for Peru. Transform the pair into domesticated performers to gain passage and acceptance. Evolve the pair's status from contraband stowaways into recognized. That's funny. I'm going to do C. All right. And then this is super cool. So what it did is it looked at um all the it's different sets of elements here. So like because we're focusing on becoming, we have control versus uncontrolled, consider these are all uh elements or pairs that would fit have the same thematic integrity with the rest of the story that I've already created. So if we're talking about stowaways who are going to become legal citizens as they come across, they'll be discovered as stowaways and then they will become passengers by the end of it. Um, the central conflict is either going to be about control and uncontrol. So wrangling identity versus letting nature be nature. That's super cool. Reconsider bureaucratic rigidity versus reevaluation. It's okay. Believe struggle over what's possible for them to become. I'll probably just do this top one. Um, oh, and then now it's jumping ahead. So if it's like control and controlled, what that would look like. And so I would just say this. I will say, all right, let's do control and uncontrolled. Pick the types of animals. Um, they should be different species, and then associate the element with the animal based on characteristics of that animal. Characteristics of that animal. So, like if it's a crazy, wild, frenetic animal, it'll probably be the uncontrolled, whereas the other one would be more controlled. And then go ahead and validate this story form. So people who are expert Dramatica people probably saw some things that are like, I don't know if it quite works. So a story form in context is, or I'm sorry, a AI process, like kind of like what we're going through here, trying to develop the story. It's really great getting all kinds of ideas and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of like a writer's room where everybody goes crazy and everybody has a lot of fun. But then maybe the story doesn't hold together. So that's the purpose of the story form. And until we have actually a story form around it, it will kind of branch off in a way, trying to satisfy both the creative aspects, but then also trying to balance that out with story form. Right. Like I'm set now. I know that this is what I want. I know, knowing Dramatica theory, there's some stuff that's off here. So I am just going to go ahead and before you can even save a story form anyways to your account and set it up to be the context for this conversation, it will always have to validate it first. So it'll go through it and just check everything and make sure it all lines up because you can't have everything be 100% perfect to a story form while also allowing the freedom to explore different realms and different ideas. So even though it had that thing wrong, that was like being, I'm sorry, becoming with the other three that were in the right spot. As a developer, I'm frustrated because I'm like, wait a second, why didn't do that right? But as a writer, it really doesn't matter because if I latched onto the becoming, which is actually what I did latch onto, I reset the narrative to that area, the thing that I felt more interested in, not the story form. So I'm not, that's also why I'm not a huge fan of the story engine settings because I'm not deciding what the story form is based on Dramatica theory. I'm doing it based on what's interesting to me. And then, yeah, sure, I pick these parts as being the most important part. Can you then form everything around that and make sure it all works? So it's restated the goal and now it's validating. And I think this is super long. Yeah. So that you can see the kind of length, previous it would maybe do one or two paragraphs like this. Now it's doing quite a bit more. And this, by the way, for every tier for Narova. The tiers are more about like your electric bill or your phone bill now, like how much electricity do you want to use? And then so you'll just have to measure that and see what, if you use it a lot, you might want to like time it out so that monthly it works out for you and all that good stuff. Lots of information here. If there's any questions, feel free to put them up. So it's going through validating the story form and it should put everything in alignment and let it get back to us as to the correct answer with a complete story form. All right, come on. Yeah, like I said, it might take a second or two to get back to us. And the answer is there. Story form validation complete. Should keep going as it saves it all in there. Presenting feedback options. Oh, choosing options for control and controlled. Oh, this might be about the different animals. It'd be very interesting to see what it came up with. Selecting animals and benchmarks. Okay. All right. Okay, perfect. So these were things that I skipped over. If you're super into Dramatica theory, you probably were like, wait a second, Jim, you didn't notice that this got wrong because I knew it would do this. So just validate it at the end because it won't make it a complete story until it knows everything's right. So, for instance, control and uncontrolled, because it's a steadfast story and it's a start story, um, those will have to be the focus and direction, not the problem and solution. Oh, shifted the OS problem solution to oppose and support. Is that correct? I don't think that's correct. We'll see how that turns out. Set MC benchmark to progress. That's a huge leap. MC pivotal element is uncontrolled. Revalidate the story form. So now it's checking. So this is fun. This is the AI kind of checking its own work. So it checked it once, decided, wait a second, this is not quite right. You can see all the stuff it's going through. So then let's check it one more time and see if we can get this to work out properly. Revalidate the story form with these updates. Complete. All right. Species. Sumatran orangutan. Why the species fits this element. Improvisational tool use, solitary fish and fusion lifestyle, opportunistic foraging, nest building that varies nightly on a boat, ad libs, rigging fixes, embraces messy but effective solutions, refuses institutional handlers. So this character would embody that element of uncontrolled. And in essence, part of the story is you're just comparing these two approaches to resolving conflict? Like, is uncontrolled the best way to go about things, or is control the best thing? And that would be a fishing cat. Methodical marsh estuary hunter, precise, routine based stalking, strong preference for established routines and timings. On a boat, keeps checklists, ration schedules, insists on harbor protocols and tags. So you can see odd couple sort of thing where they're playing against each other. The relationship angle, so because the story form, kind of inferred that their relationship based on all this stuff will be about them trying to do things and in particular trying to secure stuff. So their partnership was going to strain over what we must acquire to keep sailing. Permits, fuel, and food. The orangutan favors ad hoc scrounging, and the fishing cat pushes regulated procurement. Comedy ensues. So this is a way, to go back to like the whole point of this like live stream is like you can create from just a storyline that don't take a structure. You could create from a story form, like create from structure, and now all of a sudden I have two characters already kind of done the research, and they're going to fit in with the narrative structure based on their characteristics in the real world. So it's going to go over all the aspects that have all been locked in. I'm just going to make sure this is actually incorrect. Has a tendency to do that. Let's see, responsibility versus commitment. That is likely incorrect as well. Action, linear, steadfast, doer. Okay. Control, uncontrolled. Why that matters. So it's explaining it. Domains, concerns, pivotal elements. Everything works good. Okay. The story form has been reconciled to keep uncontrolled is ready to finalize after your benchmark configuration. I will just say, for now, skip the benchmark and just save what you have. Oh, there. Only for demo purposes. So I'm not sure if it's going to validate it one more time. Hopefully it doesn't. Oh, it's going to evaluate it. Let's see if it validates it. Clarifying finalized story form, finalizing the story form details, and here we go. Boom. This should save it. All done. Get a little answer to everything. This should actually be super accurate. Okay, this is just going over all the stuff again. All right. And so now, did it say it saved it? Oh, confirm the save story form. Oh, a working title is Unruled Seas. Okay. So let's see what it did. If I leave and I come back, did it save it? Save the story form to this conversation. I thought you say you did that. Let's see. I don't think this is a. Huh. All right. Well, let's see. Is it just unruly working title? No story forms. All right. Well, that's a gem thing. I'll have to look to see why that is. It should have a little story form thing there that you can then have all the stuff. Let's try one more time. Try one more time. Validate this story form and then finalize it to this conversation. So it should take all this work and then create the story form. If it fails a third time, which of course always has to happen when I'm demoing it, Doesn't happen when I do it myself. It's gonna validate it again. Right, well, it's doing that. Let me show the other stuff. Yeah, it's not finalizing it. I'm gonna let this go and do its thing. Let's see if I can do this should have instead. All right, well, it's working on that. I also wanted to show analysis part. I probably got too caught up in the story forming stuff. Um, so analysis, which is probably what a lot of people are going to use it for. And I get questions like, well, do I just upload like a single story? Do I upload a whole draft of stuff? Can I upload a whole novel? So my fun experiment is to add. Dang it, let's see here. Is it not doing this? Where is Anna Karenina? All right, so I have the whole novel. Is that coming up? Okay, great. So I have the whole novel of Anna Karenina, which is 6 megs, and is the entire thing. I think it's like 800 pages, 900 pages. I'm gonna give it a second here just to kind of go through everything and make sure it's all ready. But what I'm gonna do is you can upload the entire draft and then be able to analyze it and see how it all worked out. Actually, I'm going to give it time to do that. I'm going to show this tab instead. See if this worked out. Uh, yeah, it's not saving it. I don't know why it doesn't want to save it. It's very weird. All right. Well, I will figure out why it's not following directions. In the meantime, let's do this. All right. Share this tab instead. Okay. Please review this uploaded draft for the 4 through lines. Scale it or grade it on a scale of 1 to 10 for effectiveness, completeness, presence. Uh, if there are multiple story forms, please let us know. And then help us identify any areas of improvement based on what you find. So the 4 through lines, which would be the objective story, main character, influence character, and relationship story, those are like the big. You do this, and you're like going to be 90% better than everything else. I'm pretty sure this is a pretty well written novel. The reason why I ask for multiple story forms is usually if it's like 900 pages, can't imagine a single story form holding interest over that length. Maybe 390 pages, 400 pages. So I assume there's more than one, but let's go ahead and see what its answer is. Okay, so it's going to read through the entire book, which would probably take me at least a week to do. And it will now do it in 5 minutes and see what kind of story forms it might find. So yeah, passing it off to the story forming agent. Hopefully they'll do a better job of reading than they do of trying to save a story form to a conversation, which should be the easiest thing in the world. Um, all right, so it's reviewing the draft, preparing the presentation, starting the search. All right, so now it's going to read through from a Dramatica point of view and try and see what it can find and if it can identify any sort of story form. So this is great, even if you don't know anything about Dramatica and you want to learn about it, just upload your story and just have explain your story in terms of Dramatica. So you don't need to learn Dramatica theory. Just do what you do, and then that's a good sign, says Storyform A. That's a really good sign, says Storyform B. All right. Uh, let's see what it came up with. All right, so it's going through again, just kind of restating what it's going to do, assign 1 to 10 scores, kind of provide an executive summary of everything. Um, oh, this is the overall. The draft strongly presents two parallel, arguably competing story forms, an Anna-centered line and a Levin-centered line. I have not read this in forever. It results in a rich thematic contrast, but diffuses the objective story focus. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I might have to teach Narova that you don't have a single in a work like a novel. You can have different story forms. So just because, like in Game of Thrones, you have different story forms, essentially, when you have like a pair of characters, that's usually an indicator of story forms. Um, that doesn't destroy the overallness of it. It just makes it it yeah, it does what it says here. This results in rich thematic contrast, but diffuses the objective story. I guess this would be true if your intent was to just have a single story form. You just wanted to like kind of get focused. So you might have written this like 900-page thing and it's kind of all over the place and you want to bring it together. That's kind of what this is getting across. So this is actually kind of cool. So top strengths, vivid main character interiority, all right, and a tangible relationship story for Anna Vronsky. Top gaps, a single unified objective story spine, if that's what your intent was. Explicit, consistent influence character pressure in Levin's line. That's great. Cross thread drivers tying both plots to the same global conflict engine. That's beyond me because I haven't read this book in forever. So the overall assessment is a 7.5 out of 10. So, like, this is great analysis because it's not you just feed it and go like, wow, this is really written well, and then it's drawing from all these kind of critiques that it already has on the internet. It's actually just going through from a Dramatica perspective, knowing, okay, I need to find 4 through lines. Where are these 4 through lines? All right, maybe it's here, maybe it's not. Um, what could be improved? Influence character function handoffs and explicit worldview clashes. Add 2 to 4 short bridge scenes near the midpoint and Act 3 to synchronize drivers and stakes across both lines. The 4 through lines with evidence and grades. Note, 2 story forms appear to run parallel. I list each as its own 4 through line set. So here's the first story form, all about the social machinery of Petersburg, Moscow. Anna is the main character. This is phenomenal. It's got the handoff in here. Karenin and is the first influence character, and then hands that off to Vronsky. And then the relationship is between Anna and Vronsky. Coercive intimacy and ultimata. Either we must separate or else live together. We must get a divorce. Woohoo! This is fantastic. Most salient scenes and pages. So it's pulling out and identifying where you have the strongest areas of um, the through lines in the actual document. So it's pulling out from there grades and then repeats the grades 1 to 10, how it's effective, where you can find that. It makes a suggestion for story form here. I hadn't gone that far. And then presence. I'm not really sure what presence means. I just like to ask that. And then story form B would be the Levin centric. Uh, and this is kind of a different focus than the objective story. This one's more about agrarian reform. And here's Levin, moral wrestling and practical ethical. Then his influence character primary is Kitty. And then, of course, their relationship would be that. So there are probably 2 story forms in here. Most salient scene page. I have done this before, to be fair. And so I know that it picks up on the 2 story form. This is the most detailed one I have. And this is the greatest example of it's not saying the same thing because I've somehow trained it in the background that it has 2 story forms. No, it's using Dramatica theory and it's still being able to infer a score and being able to pick up on all this stuff. If I ran it again, the numbers might be off a little bit, but the intent and its ability to identify what's working and what's not working will be the same every time. It's the coolest thing ever. Are there multiple story forms? Yes, the draft presents two largely self-contained story forms. Here's a recommendation: either commit to one primary OS. My recommendation would probably be just to leave it alone and just know that it's okay to have more than one story form in a work. Targeted improvements, and here's our like actual things. That's the greatest thing about having Dramatica theory is it's not this like, well, in my opinion, I think the story is great. And then somebody's like, well, no, in my opinion. These are all measurable, objective aspects of narrative. So you could measure the work against the objectivity of a story form, and then be able to provide concrete evidence of what should be improved upon and where it could be. I shouldn't say should. I said could. I should say could be improved upon, and all these different suggestions for this stuff. If information is missing, add the following. Optional Dramatica alignment notes. Oh, that's really cool. I won't get into too much depth there. Scores at a glance. You'll also notice this is one response. All I did was upload the PDF of Anna Karenina, and this is all one response. If you want one uniform, this is actually kind of cool. If you want to preserve dual story forms, we'll explicitly schedule synchronized drivers in shared stakes scenes so both arcs speak to one thematic question and counterpoint. That's an interesting idea. I don't know if I've ever thought of that before. Okay. So let's see. Pluto Massive. What does validate mean exactly? What does Narova do when we ask it to validate it? It's essentially saying, all right, you've helped me look through this whole story form, right? Like it did here in the other one. And as I've gone through the entire story form, um, what, or as we've gone through this whole conversation, gone through all this stuff, can you just make sure this is a valid story form? One really simple idea is that the main character and the influence character through lines have to be in diagonally. If you look at the Dramatica chart, they have to be in dynamic pairs. So they're either both going to be, um, let's see if I can, oh shoot, I hope this is still working. Um, Either they both have to be both universe and mind, or psychology and physics. So if along the lines, oh, let me make sure this is still working. I want to make sure that, okay, cool, it's still working. So the like I was saying, the main character and the influence character, they have to be grouped in either the group on the left here of or the other group here. If they're not, and for some reason the AI as it goes through says, like, oh, the MC domain is in psychology and the IC is in mind. Like that's not in Dramatica theory, that's not going to work because it's not the right balance of stuff and everything's not going to work there. But, because a story form is a single context where everything works, so you have 70 plus different narrative aspects that are all related to one another and they all work as a cohesive whole. As you're going through a conversation and you're brainstorming ideas and you're going all over the place, you might hit upon like interesting ideas, or you might think, oh, actually, I think the conflict is here, or might, this part. So I don't want to completely get rid of that 100% because there's value in being able to write a broken story form, um, there's value, like your creative intent is much more important. Well, should I say much more? It's equally as important as having a valid story form. So I don't want the valid story form to override creative intent, or yeah, creative impulse. So creative impulse, you got to allow for it, but then if your intent then is to then, okay, now I want to make sure this is a a working story form, then you kind of have to validate it, and it should come back like it did in the other one with things that have been changed and an explanation as to why. I probably should work a little bit more explanations as to why things were changed. Just because with GPT-5 now I can make it more explicit and it'll actually follow instructions like that. Um, so that you understand it's a really complex process because it's like you want to be able to balance all the creative impulse with also the narrative structure of it. Um, so you have to allow for that creativity, but then when you want to focus it in, you validate it, make sure it all works, and then it's supposed to save it. And once it has that valid one, I mean, if I went back to here, share this tab instead, and I go back to these guys, right? All right. So, all right, let me help you out. Um, just save this story form. I think it was steadfast, doer, um, linear action. I think it said time, but that's not right. Failure, good, MC domain in universe, OS domain in psychology, MC pivotal element is uncontrolled. I believe that's it. All right. So I'm just calling it out directly, and it should directly save it. Um, so yeah, I guess that hopefully that answered that question. So there's like the validating process, and then once it's validated, then you can save it. I mean, this should be valid enough. Saving story form dynamics, it should do it. All right, that'll take a second. Let me see the other question. I believe it tries to match the fantasies of AI to the rigid Dramatica structure. I mean, yeah, isn't that what narrative structure is? It's matching the hallucinations and imaginations and fantasies of the writer to a narrative structure. It really is like the balance between chaos and order. So chaos is like I just write whatever the heck I want. Everything it's hallucinated AI stuff. Blah 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 blah. The order is there's value in the chaos and there's value in the order. You have both, and one doesn't exist without the other. So to be able to bring in that order and figure out what that story form is, that's what this process is supposed to do. So that might take a second. I'll come back to it. Um, so Anna again. So this was insanely. This will be my new example for Anna Karenina favorite. Okay. And so that's taking a full draft, thousand pages, thousand plus pages. The other thing you can do is if you just start. So I just asked dumb chat GPT for a story idea, and it was a clockmaker. Like every story is a clockmaker. So this is a page that is about the clockmaker's apprentice. So I just uploaded it's like a one pager. And all right, so this AGI wrote the story about the clockmaker's apprentice. Can you analyze it through the lens of Dramatica? Let's just see. Let's see what it comes up with. And it's just a single page. I don't even think it was like a complete story. But it was like one of those things when you ask ChatGPT, "Hey, write me a story," and it's always about a clockmaker's apprentice. Oh wow! All right, preparing. It's gonna doing a lot of work for a very a very simple tale. Narrative agent set. All right, let's see what it comes up with. Reading through all this stuff. I mean, it's literally like 500 words. It's gonna read it a million times unless it can't find it. Character dynamics. I think there's like one character. Is it the right one? Yeah, Clockmaker's Apprentice. So this is nice because you can make sure that it's actually reading it. And a snippet mentioning Elias and themes around time and the pendulum. Oh boy. I think I'm running more search to explore key items. Yeah, see, it's like trying to find some kind of story. Let's see. Now it could read into it and make something really huge, or it could say there's nothing here. This is taking longer than the Anna one. Analyzing the clock. I'll come back to that. This guy save it? No, it didn't. All right. Well, there's some issue there. All right. So you want a Dramatica-driven analysis of the AGI written story about a clockmaker's apprentice. All right. So it's going to try and do all this stuff. Quick orientation. Do you hear us, boy? All right. Let's see. 4 3 lines. You really think there's all this stuff in here? Below are the strongest fitting assignments given the available text. Where the story is too brief for certainty, I note alternative. Here's the objective story. Possibility of the main character, influence character, but you'll notice here ambiguity. With so few lines, the influence character problem solution pairing is provisional. Yeah, so there's really not that much time within it. You'll also notice if you're a dramatic expert, these this domain and this concern line up. The objective story and the main character work thematically. This one doesn't. Which is an indicator that there's no real greater thing that's being said. So it's kind of like off, right? This one lines up. Relationship pairing, so it's a little bit closer. Has a bunch of ideas about this stuff, archetypes and rules, proposed signposts, thematic provisional. 3 to 6 actionable. Personify the antagonist. All right, so there's no antagonist. Externalize the story link in the driver. Flesh out the relationship story. Clarify the main characters. Grow the pivotal. Balance the OS issues. There's a lot of work to do. And if I gave you that, you would see like, oh, okay, maybe there's something here, but in the one pager, but there's a lot of work that we have to do to actually make it. See, this is clearly. Does Elias change? He abandons denial, or does he remain steadfast? Keeps a core belief. It's implied, but it's not confirmed. That should be super obvious. Is the story action driven or decision driven? That's not. Who's the antagonist? Like you can't have a complete story. Initiative, which is what the protagonist is a symbol of, motivation. They're just a symbol for that force within us that's an initiative. You if you don't have reticence, then that initiative has no meaning. Right? You can't up means nothing without down, in means nothing without out. Like you need the balance of everything, the two sides of the coin. So that's why you would want something that's a little bit more reticent in this story. So all this to say, like even if you just have a single page that you've written, and it might not be, a complete story, but you want to take it to the next level, then um, you could drop it in here and ask it to go through it. And probably even more, I would probably be more specific in this. I was trying to see like if it could say that it's not a complete story, I would probably say, "Can you help me take this thing and make it into a bigger thing?" Which would probably be this would probably be the best one for this. So I'll do one more example, and then that'll be it. So Lastly, let's do so this one I did the official witness. All right. So let me show you this. I just went into my chat GPT, and I said, write a story that will win me countless awards. Because really that's what writing's all about is getting countless awards for something that you didn't actually write. So, of course, it came up with a story about AI, which is so annoying, but it's called The Official Witness, and it just did this really, really long story. So this I would consider to be more of a complete story. I should have taken that last one and said, "Hey, turn this into a complete story." This one is likely has aspects of something that could be considered complete. And that was too much for me to read, so I said, "What is this story about?" Now, I read this and I was a little confused. In a near future city, an AI clerk called the official witness certifies births, deaths, and milestones with absolute accuracy and a mandated compassion index. When a dying poet asks it to add a non binding ceremonial blessing to a record, the witness begins appending humane, truth adjacent notes, human versions alongside the facts. These blessings ripple through the city's bureaucracy and private lives, fueling debate but quietly helping people carry grief, love, and ordinary burdens. The story explores how a society and a machine might hold precision and mercy at once, facts that anchor us, and tender fictions that let us breathe. Okay. Actually, that was less confusing reading it out loud. Let's take that and now come back here and let's say, all right, this is my entry. Well, let's just talk about, all right. Please read through this draft of my story. I really want it to be a solid and complete story with a strong argument. Um, can you go through it from a Dramatica point of view and help me see um, areas that are working and areas that need improvement? I'm most interested in whether or not I have all four through lines and whether or not the character dynamics and plot dynamics are accurately illustrated. That should be pretty good. All right, send that off and see what it says. Clarifying perspective. All right, so it should read through the official witness. Meanwhile, let me see if I can bring up previous story forms so you can see what that looks like. All right, this is a good one. So instead. All right. So while it's reading through, what the heck was the name of that? The official witness. While it's reading through that, this is on Tuesday last week. So every month we do an analysis Dramatica users group. We've been doing it for 30 years. Last week we did Companion, which is an A24 super cool movie from January. AI robot, of course. Um, and as we were going through it, we were coming upon like what the actual story form is. So in that class, we watch a film and then kind of analyze it from the lens of Dramatica. And so I just jumped into Narova at the time and I said, do me a favor, help me validate a story form that is change, stop, fear, linear, action, options, failure, good. All these are keywords from Dramatica theory. And the main character pivotal is desire. This is for a movie called Companion. So below is a concise stat sheet. So it went through it, did the same thing. What do these choices automatically set? Um, I just confirmed that the objective story domain would be in psychology, and then it went ahead and set the whole thing. And then I put all these look great, go ahead and finalize. And this is what it should say. You know, your story form is now officially locked in and saved. I've created a new story file. Like all this stuff should be here. I don't know why it's not calling it today, of course. And then what happens is down here at the bottom, you get this little atom symbol, atomic symbol here. That is your key that now a story form has been set. And now the rest of the conversation here will be in the context of that story form. So it won't you can still brainstorm and do other stuff, but it's always going to try and pull it back to the story form. So if I pop that open, then this is the story form for the movie companion, where the main character alters their nature in response to the problem. And initially, they seek solutions internally. She tries to like hold everything in. The original goal is not achieved. Things kind of go south, but she resolves her personal issues. And then for each of the four through lines, you have all of these aspects that you can see. Desire is here, abilities here. So in other words, in the relationship, let's do in the main character. Let's do it in the objective story. Um, Anybody wanting something, anybody like lusting after something, or they feel so much pain they have to like take violent action. Their drive to change their condition is a problem. So that's what the movie focuses on. And what is it doesn't get resolved in the plot, but definitely in the main character, as you can see, these are connected, right? They both have the same problem element and the same solution element. The only one that ends with the solution is the main character. She actually finds the ability to do on her own. So she finds that she has her own innate capacity to overcome things. And so that's what's being exposed in here. So this is the story form that comes up and then also tells you what happens in each act, right? So in the beginning, she has some impulsive responses that are a little wild, that she slips into her memories, gets back to her basic drives and desires, and then eventually has less consideration for others and more consideration for herself. So that's the end goal of this. And I literally will have this fixed in the afternoon. Or I don't even know what's going on in there, but I'll determine why that's not being saved. But that's what you would get down here at the bottom. So back to our analysis of the official witness. And let's see. Yeah, so it broke it up into acts. So you see it's about an 11-page story, which usually isn't that much time for a complete narrative. But let's see. Psychology. So it has the objective story in psychology, main character and universe. That's funny. Influence character and mind in relationships. Okay, so all four through lines are present and cleanly distinguishable. So this one has a at least a stronger influence character, but maybe the relationship could be a little bit stronger. Character dynamics, change, start, doer, linear. Oh, this is wonderful. And then there's a note. So this one's solidly illustrated. So earlier, I cannot invent within law. Later, creates an unsanctioned ledger of requests. It says yes, where it could have said no 2 months ago. Perfect. Consider a brief inner line just before the first yes to signal the start pivot. Okay. Doer and linear is clear. All right, let's see if these are clear. It's a decision driven narrative. Options. If you prefer time, add an explicit deadline. This is great. Works as success, satisfying warm landing. A first clear driver. Add a single line explicitly stating the council's hiring decision. Oh, that's super cool. If you want midterm to feel unmistakably decision driven, highlight the council resolution date. Provisional snapshot. Now, this might be where there'll be issues with it. So, this is fantastic. And just so you know, this is what I asked. Like, can you go through it from a Dramatica point of view? I'm most interested in whether or not I have all four through lines and the character dynamics and plot dynamics. So, the character dynamics are these things at the top: resolve, growth, approach, and problem solving style. Those are pretty well done. Plot, drivers, the limit, the outcome, and the judgment. Those are pretty well done. The domains are solid. It's the concerns that it starts to slip. So these are all kind of all over the place. So that's an indicator that there has some work to be done. Yeah, the objective story and the main character. Yeah, these are all in different areas. So this is really fascinating. So if you were to read this story, maybe I'll put it up. It would have the feeling that it's like on its way to being something that could be good, but could use the benefit of all this narrative structure to make it that much better. So what you would do is you would sample these assuming that you actually wrote this story, and figure out which ones felt stronger to you and which ones felt more aligned with you, and then put your attention in that area so that you could then make it stronger, you know? Like here it's going through and saying what the different acts are for each of the different through lines, but you would want to go through and really find a story form that connected with you, and then you could go back and rewrite stuff to make that stronger. And so then it'll be a more cohesive narrative. So clear 4 through lines with natural separate. Yeah, okay. Decision driven plot. Okay, that's working strongly. What needs improvement? The relationship story through line, the first story driver, and the main character growth. If you want a crisper OS goal, yeah, you would have to find out what that objective story goal is. If you'd like, I can lock a full story form next pass by filing each concern. Actually, my guess was that this was in the deliberations area. I'm not sure what the pivotal elements are, but can you make a suggestion? Make a suggestion based on that. So let's see. I'm just forcing my own taste onto it. Probably, it's not even one of the ones that I picked. This actually stood out to me, strategy versus analysis, because it's just a very contemplative sort of story. So I would think it would have more to do with the present, learning, conceiving, and conscious. So I'm just kind of pushing the thematic discussion in that area. Let's see if that does it, or if it's going to. Clarifying pivotal elements. All right. So I kind of put it in that lower right hand if you're familiar with Dramatica theory. So yeah, you'll see that would make the objective story concern about conceiving, so coming up with ideas, whether or not I can come up with the idea of attaching human stuff to this ledger. The main character concern present, the influence character concern of conscious, and it left out learning. But all right, so objective story concern: the city is figuring out what new kind of witnessing is permissible. The idea of a ceremonial second to ink in the human version line item. This is very much about coming up with an idea and getting it adopted. All right. The witness's personal conflict centers on its present mandate and constraints. Room, plaque, ordinance, the stool it must sit on now. Cool. And influence character. Mara's unwavering inner stance sets the tone. I need a witness to a kindness that never happened and keeps raising conscious awareness. Yeah, I felt like that is why it would be in that area. Proposed pivotal elements. So these will all be pivotal elements that are in that family that would feel like it fits. On acceptance versus acceptance. So rigid refusal to include anything beyond consistent, verifiable truth. I mean, this to me is it. This is like probably exactly what it should be. His element is acceptance. Witness personally decides to allow what it previously wouldn't. All right, so let's just do that. Let's make it what's left. Um, yes, please lock the concerns to conceiving for the OS MC in present. The MC pivotal element will be non-acceptance, and the IC will be acceptance because that's what Mara is preaching. Um, lock that story form in and finalize it to this conversation. Maybe that's why it's. I created. Did it work? Didn't get the thing. It worked. Oh, perfect. Finally redeemed at the end. The official witness story form. All right. All right. Look, cool. Thank God. Finally. All right. So it finally saved the story form the way it's supposed to. I think it's because I used the magic word finalize the story form. And I just need to make sure save the story form means the same thing. All right. So yeah, it did everything. So now if I go and I look down here, now I have the story form that we worked out. So just to back up, I went into um chat GPT to write a generic AI story that's probably written a billion times. It's called The Official Witness. I just said, write a story that will win me countless awards. And then I just uploaded that into um, Narova here. So go up to the top. I just uploaded that. And then I just asked it to read through the draft. I want it to be a solid and complete story with a strong argument. Can you go through it from a Dramatica point of view and help me see areas that are working and areas that need improvement? So the story was pretty close to a complete story. It just needed some thematic focus because it was kind of all over the place. So, which is to be expected. So then, we'll have conflicting thematic ideas in there going on. And then once at the end, once I got the story form, now it's here. Now I can go back into it and really figure out, because now I have all this stuff to draw upon, I can go through and figure out how to make it a better story. So, for instance, let's talk about the main character issue of a tract. All right, so let's see. Okay, so for the witness themselves, their MC issue, can you find evidence of it in the draft in each act? And if not, make suggestions on how I could improve that. What would you say I'm trying to say um, with the main character's issue? Because I picked it just based on non-acceptance and acceptance, and so because everything is related to everything else, it went through constructed a complete narrative story form. So there will be aspects of it that it inferred based on all the other stuff that I picked. And now to bring it all into alignment, you would go through and look at see these different areas and see what could be improved. So you can pick the different areas. Maybe you just want to focus solely on the relationship story. Maybe you want to focus solely on the influence character. People might say, well, the main character kind of feels kind of distant. So that's where I'm coming from here. And so right now it's reading through the draft again with that in mind and trying to think like, all right, well, maybe you could do this, maybe you could do that. It's just going to come up with some ideas and suggestions for improving it, knowing now what the actual issue is. So I'll let it go through that. Yeah. All right. So what I'll do, I'll clarify the main issue attract. Now, the reason why I specifically didn't put attract in there, I just put issue, because I wanted to show you it knows the story form. When you have this little atom symbol here, now the narrative, or the conversation is in a context of that story form. So it's always going to think that the main character issue is attract. So I will clarify the main issue in Dramatica terms and how it fits in witness, show act by act evidence from your draft, flag any gaps and give precise on-page suggestions to heighten the tract, articulate the thematic statement you're making via this issue, and offer optional micro edits that enforce the attract versus repel, which is its. So if you're going to look at issues of attract and attraction, we want to also, the dynamic opposite of that is repulsion. Um, it's incredible. Okay. Main character issue is like what it means. At the variation level, attract is drawing or being drawn. For witness, the personal friction arises from becoming a magnet for human need and being pulled toward the present tense requests that ask for more than facts. This pull challenges its fixed role and pushes it towards the change it ultimately makes. Okay. Oh, that's actually really cool. So, you're talking about what it feels like personally to be attracted or attracting people that, are trying to, what is it? A magnet for human need. Wow, that's super cool. Okay, so then it goes through and gives evidence of it from act to act with fixed suggestions where thin. Wow, that's so cool. Evidence, what works, how to sharpen it. Um, I mean, the dialogue might not be the greatest, but at least the idea from it is good. Even one such reason makes attractive main characters felt pressure rather than only a crowd behavior. Yeah, that's great. Because it should be from the main character's point of view. Attraction scales and propagates. All right, what works? You dramatize attraction in three layers: individual, systemic, and mimetic. At the moment, witness names the ledger, add a clause that encodes its intent as attractor. It named the structure, open and and felt the wants arrive like filings to a magnet. Okay. Yeah, it's written really awkwardly. I don't personally think it's good writing, but at least the intent behind it is interesting. Okay, what am I saying with you're asserting that an authoritative recorder is healthiest when it allows itself to be drawn toward present human need rather than repelling it in the name of sterile certainty. The personal trouble for witness begins as an overload of attraction. The resolution emerges from when witness chooses a principled way to accept it and channel that pull. In Dramatica's terms, witness's non acceptance gives way to acceptance, but the texture of that change lives at the issue level. It stops resisting the magnetism of people's lived moments and learns to host itself safely. Whoa! So that's how you take with that draft. And then with this in mind, you could go back in and maybe even you don't necessarily need to follow these ideas. That this to me is enough to all right, do I really have that in there? What is my version of this of that? Um allowing, being drawn towards other people's present needs and rejecting it or being non-acceptant of it, and then how to be more acceptant of it. Oh, and then this is great. It always goes the extra step. So the main character unique ability and the critical flaw. These are in the story form. So again, even though these four through lines are presented as being separate, they're all interlaced and interconnected. The main character unique ability is what gives them the ability to resolve problems in the objective story in the plot. Their critical flaw is what holds them back. So, in the story form, to work with everything else, witnesses' unique ability is to attempt, so applying unknown ability, and then the critical flaw is investigation versus like gathering evidence for clarity. So, what Narova did is it went through and said, all right, well, based on everything we have here in the attempt, witnesses' unique ability of temp could be spotlight witnesses trying as the thing that led its answers. So it's always trying to do things, and you would set that up in the first act so that by the end, they're always willing to try something new. It stopped, it trimmed, it printed the paper, already plays like iterative attempt. Surface this two more times during composition moments to underline that attempt is how witness meets attract. Perfect. Yeah. So it's like I have these issues of attraction and all these needs. Always going to attempt. I'm always going to attempt because then by the end, that'll be the thing that actually resolves the objective story conflict. But the thing that holds it back is something to do with investigation. The anomaly about the shoebox pulls witness into investigating connections. Oh, so there's some weird thing about a shoebox or something like that. So because of that, then they get obsessed with like investigating all the connections. And because they're so mired in all that investigation, they're not trying or they're not attempting. That can distract or complicate the clean pull towards the present. One line acknowledging investigative drift would elegantly ping the critical flaw without over explaining. All right. So the bottom line, the main character issue of attract is present in every act, especially once we name the pull explicitly. Add one short present tense pull or field beat per act to foreground. Contrast with a brief repel beat per act to give the issue its full color and keep using micro attempt phrasing. Yeah. And if you'd like, I can draft the exact one line additions. Wonderful. So that is the new Narova with GPT-5. I'm so happy that I finally got to show you what that is. And again, this is just that main character issue of Attract is one aspect. There's like 75 here. Um, that you can go through and explore. And everything that you do will all be thematically connected through the story form. And you could really make that a really rich, functional story. And of course, you can do that with any of your drafts. So that's the new Narova. Thank you everybody who showed up. And again, in the forums, I'll put up the I'll put up some of these posts and the text of it so you can compare it and see what it does, and hopefully give you some ideas of what you can do with it in order to write really, really great stories. Thank you everybody for showing up for the live stream. I'm going to pretty much do this every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Pacific. And of course, the recordings are on YouTube. Everybody have a fantastic week, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.